Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Hope you are well. Let's see. Hey, Suhey, how you doing? Nice to see you. Tuesday, we are in October, and gosh, imagine this: the 27th of October, meaning by the weekend, October will be over, and we will be in November. Halloween, we got Thanksgiving, we got the rest of the holidays coming up here pretty quickly. So, I'll just say, think about your holiday prospecting plan. What are you going to do to lead generate as we move into the holiday season? Because guess what? There is no month where homes do not sell. So, what are you going to do to capture your piece of that business, right? So, anyways, just something I wanted to throw out there, and we are going to get started real quickly here. So, first and foremost, let me get into the chat and I will drop our manual. Let's see here. Okay. We're going to do a lot of note taking today and love to have some participation with some commentary around that. Today, it's all about negotiation and great class for where we are in basically the market. You know, it's so competitive right now. And so we're going to actually talk about a lot of stuff that's very relevant and applicable to negotiating in today's market, because again, you know, the competition is fierce and we got to do what we got to do to really serve our clients and help, help them get their houses, whether that's on the listing side or the buyer side, by the way, because, negotiations happen on all levels here. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We are in Elemental Session 7, Negotiate the Deal. Last week of Ignite, by the way. We are going to be done on Friday, so look forward to that. All right, cool. So what we're going to focus on today, growing the business, running the business, and all points in between. We are going to be going through basically this process today. Break down the common points of negotiation. We are going to examine the 3Ps approach to negotiation as well. We are going to analyze counter tactics. We're going to employ the 3Ps with some activities, and then we will recap and talk about some ahas. So I dropped the manual in the chat. If you don't see it, let me know. I can put it in there again. It's a PDF. You want to either have on your computer or have somewhere to take notes. A lot of this stuff we'll be able to see online as well, okay? So with that said, let's jump into this. So here's what we're thinking about. I want you to consider these questions, and I want you to write the answers to these questions, okay? So first of all, negotiation is a bargaining process between two or more parties seeking to discover a common ground and to reach an agreement to settle a matter or a mutual concern or resolve a conflict. So I'll say that again. Negotiating is a bargaining process between two or more parties with the plan to discover common ground, reach an agreement, settle a matter, or resolve a conflict, okay? So we're looking to obviously reach agreements. We're looking to settle matters. We're trying to find areas of mutual concern that everybody, we want to gain, agreement on. And then ultimately we may have to resolve some conflicts which do arise in real estate transactions, okay? And, the graphic on the screen shows what a negotiation looks like. The negotiation happens between a buyer or seller and their agent first, and then it also happens between the agents involved in the transaction. So if you look at the graphic, the picture here, you see that you have the buyer on the top, and then you have the buyer's agent. They're negotiating, right? You're negotiating to get an offer written, repairs requested, coming up with terms. And then the buyer's agent and the seller's agent get together and negotiate in terms of what's going to be the common ground that everybody's willing to settle for. And keeping in mind, our goal here is to sell a house, right? And then the seller's agent goes back to the seller and negotiates with them to get the offer accepted. And this is not a linear process, meaning this isn't just flow from top to bottom, right? As we know, a seller and a seller's agent are going to sit down and figure out and negotiate about list price and any repair requests they receive and any other terms and possession. And then they're going to go back to the buyer's agent, back and forth. And so there's a lot of back and forth, flowing up, flowing down here. But that's the process. That's the general idea of negotiating. I think it's really important to understand that there are multiple points of negotiating happening during a real estate transaction, right? It's not the buyer and the seller negotiating directly with each other. There's a lot of layers to that. Okay. And then, when we're in the offer phase, basically, if you really think about it, there's two major points in a transaction, at least, of negotiating. The first phase would be getting the contract accepted, right? Getting the buyer and seller to agree to terms. And the second phase would be during the contingency period or option period, mainly, waiting for the repair requests and contingencies to be removed and things of that nature to get to the point where we're now ready to close the deal and all contingencies are removed and no one really has rights to cancel anymore. Okay. So let's do this. I'd like for you guys to just take a couple quick notes, and then I'm going to ask for a couple of answers here. But look at the 4 questions here. How can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal? What are some ways that you negotiate in your everyday life? What are skills that great negotiators possess? And then why is asking questions important when negotiating? So I want you guys to take 2-3 minutes, jot down your answers, type up your answers, think about what your responses to these 4 questions are, and then I want to hear what your answers are. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So somebody let me know what you wrote down for any of the questions. Somebody give me an answer as to any of the things you wrote down real quickly.
Hi, this is Jesse.
Hey, Jesse, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? So for number 2, so I have my son. He's 5 years old. So I kind of like negotiate with him. So I give him like a lot of options and let him kind of like choose. But at least I present it to him. So that's negotiating like shower time, dinner, just giving him like a lot of options and letting him decide what's what's fair, what's best. And obviously, like I make the the decision, but at least I give them some options.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Well, and the older they get, right, the more they're going to start putting some more influence, right? So, you're absolutely right. That is something that anyone that is a parent or even just other family members, right, getting somebody to do something, right, and hopefully it's a win-win and you're going for a common goal. But at the end of the day, right, that is a negotiation, right? So, just like you said, when's shower time? When are we brushing teeth? When are we going to bed? When is it time to clean the room? Those are all points of negotiating, whether it's kids or family members or what have you. So yeah, great answer. So love that. Thank you so much. Somebody else, any one of these questions. Somebody else, give me what you wrote down for any of these real quickly, and then we'll move on.
Hi, Nick. Charlie.
Morning, Charlie.
So what are skills that great negotiators possess? I would think they have to be really good listeners, listen closely to what's important to the other side.
Yeah.
And try and get a win-win.
You know, that is a great piece of feedback. Absolutely, you're right. Listening is super important. You know, a lot of people think negotiating is talking and convincing, but the reality is you can't convince somebody if you don't know what they want. And so we've got to really dig and ask a lot of questions, which we see as the fourth one here. Why is asking questions so important? Well, if we don't ask questions, we won't know what's important to people. And that's going to influence how we pitch and present, especially when we look at like our 3P model for negotiating. So, you know, you're spot on. Listening, you know, there's the old adage that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much, right? So there you go. Yep, thanks for that feedback. So super important, and we're gonna jump into that a little bit more as well. So thank you for that. Let's keep going. You know, the next part of this presentation has to do with negotiating issues. So if you guys want to take a look at page number 4 in your manual, there are just a bunch of blank lines written down there. And what we're going to do is just have a quick brainstorm again. I'm going to have you guys write down all the different issues in a real estate transaction. And I mean from start to finish, from like when you first meet a buyer or you first meet a seller, all the way through putting a deal together, through closing escrow and beyond. I want you guys just to write down, what are all the different issues you can think of that could arise that would be a negotiation point in the process of buying and selling real estate? Take a minute or two to write those answers down. So I think we can all agree there are quite a few areas where negotiating could come into play. With that said, though, let's hear what you guys are writing down. What are you guys writing down? Give me a couple of the things that you put down on your manual here.
Price.
Price, that's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, that's kind of one of the probably one of the hardest ones, right? Maybe the most important one. Absolutely. Price. Price is price is price. You got it. Thanks, Nicole. What else?
Contingencies.
Your contingency periods, time frames, right? Those are points of negotiation for sure. The time frames and getting a buyer to remove contingencies or getting a seller to accept lengthening contingencies, right? That could be a negotiation point as well. What else do y'all write?
Inspections. If something shows a problem.
Yep. So that would be like repairs, credits, any sort of requests. Absolutely. Yep. What else?
Buyer's remorse or like seller's remorse.
That's a great one. Yeah. I mean, buyer's remorse is real. You know, people make an offer, they open escrow, and the next morning they freak out and think, what the heck did I just do? Right. You know, when I help somebody write an offer, or whenever I help somebody buy a house, I always bring that up. I always tell them as part of my script, you're going to freak out. And it usually happens around 3 in the morning. I won't be available at that time. So make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen, put it by your bedside, write down all your notes, and then give me a call in the morning and we'll talk about it. But you will have what's called buyer's remorse, and here are the signs of it, right? And so I always bring it up. They know that it's a part of the process. Good one.
Awesome.
What else, guys and gals? What else do you write?
Days on market, and then the climate of the market, like if it's a seller's market or if it's a buyer's market, that can play into it.
Okay, yeah. So those are factors that could affect other terms that we would negotiate. Things like, what does a buyer offer, right? When you think about that, right? So here's kind of the bigger picture with the days on the market and the market conditions. That's going to influence what you get your buyer to make an offer at, right? So we're thinking about where we are today in this hot market, hot sellers market. For the most part, properties, houses are selling in a couple of days, right? And so you've got to convince your buyer to overbid, right? To do escalation clauses, shorten time frames, right? There's all kinds of different ways that they got to compete. And so getting your buyer to write a competitive offer is a negotiating point. Getting your seller to accept an offer could be a negotiating point as well, because if their property isn't that hot, or maybe it's overpriced a little bit and they're not getting the activity they thought, those could be factors as well. When you take a listing, getting your seller to list at a reasonable price, right? Getting your buyer to get pre-approved. Just that alone, is a negotiating point, not showing until they're fully pre-approved. You can waste your time with a lot of people if they don't show you that they can afford to buy, right? So that's a big one as well. So there's a lot of factors here, but if we think about an actual sale, okay, and we turn to page number 5 in our manuals here, we'll look at the common points of negotiating. You have on the left, Nicole, first thing we said, price is there, boom. And then on the right side is our terms. And terms basically is all the other factors in a deal, right? And so we have closing costs. Who's paying the closing costs? In most instances, in our market, you're probably not getting your buyers' closing costs covered by the sellers. In most instances, not 100% of the time, but it's probably less likely now than it might be in a more balanced market. The closing date. How long do people need to close escrow? And then conveyances. What comes with the house, right? Maybe the seller has a bunch of stuff in the property that's in good shape, and the buyer's going to be an investor and buy it as an Airbnb and wants to keep a bunch of stuff. Maybe you negotiate with that, right? Maybe you change the value or the price based on conveyances. The earnest money, or what they would call an option fee, basically the good faith deposit, our initial deposit. How much is that? How much are we putting up to show that we're putting our best foot forward, right? In the seller's market, we generally want those to be on the higher side for our buyers, because it strengthens our offers, right? And then repairs, like we talked about after the inspection, what kind of repairs or requests, okay? I'm going to add something in here, and it's a super important topic right now. I'm going to add in here possession. I want you all to write down on your manual or take a note. Possession. When does the buyer get the keys? When does the seller have to move out? And I'll tell you, on the brokerage side of things, meaning when I get calls about complaints, for the past couple of months, the number one topic I get almost on a daily basis is the seller's not moving out. What do I do? Okay, this is happening all the time. And why? Well, for many reasons. I hear a lot that the seller, their up leg hasn't closed yet. They haven't, closed the deal on the home they're trying to buy, so they can't move. Sometimes they just don't want to move, or they're not ready, right? I've had situations where a seller is selling and taking all their cash and just going to go travel the country, but they're just not ready to start their trip yet, and they won't get out of the house, right? So, or there's sometimes it's even as simple as, we told you we'd give you the keys at noon, but now we need till 6 p.m., right? So a smaller amount of time. So I would encourage all of you, when you're putting a deal together, the hard part is thinking 30 days from now, what do I need to do here? What do I need to be thinking about in terms of transferring possession, right? And it's something we don't really put a lot of thought into. We just write in there that it's on the day of close. And we don't call the other agent and say, what does the seller need? What does the buyer need? How can we work this out? I'll tell you what, on any of your buyer deals, and maybe even on your seller deals, I highly recommend that if you're going to have any sort of possession after close, whether it's an hour, a day, or a week, or a month, I don't care. I would suggest having the seller leave money in escrow and have that money refunded to them if they vacate on time, or transferred to the buyer if they do not. And you need to make it substantial. So there's like a little, skin in the game for the seller. If a seller knows there's $5,000 in escrow that the buyer gets out of their equity if they don't move out after the third day of close, they have a lot more incentive to get out, right? And then what is that money for? Well, it's the money to cover the cost of an eviction. That's the only way to get a seller out. That's the big problem, is like a seller won't move out after a day or 2 days. Well, what can you do? Not much. The only legal recourse is an actual unlawful detainer action and evict them. But that takes months, and many months in this environment. So, the only other way is to pre-plan this stuff. And when we think about negotiating, you really want to think, how can I be ahead of things, right? And you need to have a lot of communication, especially towards the close of escrow. If you have a seller that's contingent on buying another house, you need to be checking in with that agent. Where are they at? Are they signing loan documents? Are they ready to fund? And if not, you may need to extend your escrow and set up reasonable expectations with all parties. So I wanted to bring that up again. It's not in the manual here, but it is something that I see, and it's by far the number one complaint that I receive or challenge that agents are facing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so something to keep in mind. All right, let's keep going. So next slide here is using negotiation tips to respond on common points. Okay, let's see here. So page number 6, if you guys want to follow along, we're going to look at what kind of negotiating tips we want to use to frame, basically, like to start a negotiation, right? So number 1, it says, of course, above all else, be professional at all times, right? We're in a work environment. We're all trying to achieve the common goal here. So we want to stay professional, even if the other party's a little heated or whatever, maintain your professionalism. Number 2 here, it says, remember your goal, a signed contract. Whenever I have an agent or a client call me because they're having a challenge, I always frame the conversation with, what do we need to do to let the buyer buy and help the seller sell? How can we get everybody to go towards the end result of closing a transaction or getting the contract signed or whatever it is, right? What are we looking to achieve? So the goal in the beginning of a negotiation is a signed contract. This is what you're driving towards. And it's what both agents and clients have in mind. It's what everybody wants. We all want the same thing, right? Number 3, very important. Control what you say to anyone involved in the transaction, whether it's another agent or clients, right? If you create anxiety in your client or other parties, you're reducing their leverage in negotiating. So when we talk about being professional, another part of that is just being totally calm and relaxed when you're having a discussion. And I know in the heat of the moment, you're trying to get a deal done and you want to get paid so you can pay bills, et cetera. But you got to always remember what is in the best interest of the client. How can I help them? How can I stay calm and remove myself from the equation? We never want to kill a deal, but if that's the only option that's the most beneficial to our client, then that's what we got to do. So you got to stay calm, stay relaxed, and always make sure you have your client's best interest at heart. Okay. I love number 4. Continually refer to motivation. What is the motive to take action? What are people looking to accomplish, right? And it says here, remind your client why they want to buy or sell, and then help them reevaluate their request if they are becoming unreasonable, right? So if your seller gets a repair request that they are just, absolutely not willing to entertain, well, a great way to frame that is to take a step back and say, look, what are we trying to do? At the end of the day, you said you want to move to Texas, and you're going to be there. You have to be there in the next 60 days. So at what cost? At what cost is this actual repair request, right? Saying no might kill the deal and you got to start over, and then you might be under more stress. Is it worth it, right? So you back up. Same thing on the buyer side. if they're not willing to write a good, strong offer, or even get pre-approved, or go look at properties, or make a reasonable repair request, whatever it is, you back up a little bit and ask, what are we really looking to do here? Right? Because buyers will get caught up in the smallest of things, like, the color of the paint, or, the layout of the, kitchen isn't exactly what they want. And so sometimes you got to step back and say, what are you really looking to do? Right? You want to own real estate. We're not just trying to move into a different residence, a different dwelling. We're trying to become investors in the real estate market. So with that said, are there any areas you might be a little bit more flexible with? Okay. So, and, again, I like to not only remind the client of their motivation, I actually prefer to ask and have them tell me again, because it kind of regrounds them. And when they say it, it's their idea, not ours. So I don't say, you told me you wanted to buy a house because. I say, tell me originally what you told me why you wanted to own real estate, right? So I want them to say it. I want them to come out of their mouth. And that goes to number 6. Listen, right? Don't reveal too much. Listen more than you talk. You want to hear what they say. And, I always say the simplest definition for me for sales, find out what somebody wants and then give it to them, right? Tell me what you're looking for and I'll help you find it. I can show you exactly what you need to do. You want to buy a house? You want to save on taxes? You want to start building equity? Cool. I know exactly how to do that. Let's start the process, right? So, and then when you're negotiating with another party, obviously you're going to keep your client's motivation very close to your chest. You're not going to reveal too much. You're not going to show your cards, as we would say. And then number 6, again, I mentioned this, stay calm, stay cool, collected. Don't be attached to the outcome. For you as an agent, that's such a powerful statement. Don't be attached to the outcome. You can't get everything you and your client wants all the time. Okay. Does not happen because you have multiple parties here, right? So don't let it affect your mindset if a deal doesn't go through. Trust me when I tell you, not every deal you all open are going to close. It's just a fact, right? And when I help people do the economic model, which is basically figuring out how many sales you need to do and how many appointments you need to go on to close a certain amount and earn a certain amount in profit and income, I always factor in a cancellation rate, right? I always factor in that, 1 out of 10 deals in this market are going to fall apart. Now, in this market, I would say that most escrows are closing. So your cancellation rate will probably be pretty low, 90% at least, I would say. When the market changes a little bit and it gets more balanced or maybe shifts to a buyer's market, you may have more fallout. Your cancellation rate may actually increase at that point. So when we say don't be attached to the outcome, we factor that into your numbers. So you know that you potentially may not close every single deal. In a perfect world, we would, but the reality is that may not be realistic. And so we want to really be realistic with that. Okay, moving on. So we're going to talk about the 3 Ps approach to negotiation. And what does that mean? Well, so think about this. When you guys got into real estate and you went through the licensing process and you took your principles, you took your practice, you took your elective, whatever elective you took, did they really teach you how to build a business and sell houses? Right. They did not. They talked to you about meets and bounds and lots and tracts and how many square feet are in an acre. Anyone know how many square feet are in an acre now that you passed? Anybody? All right. Okay. A little over 40,000, by the way. But we don't, when are you going to use that? Right? When are you going to use that? Did they talk to you about negotiating? Did they give you a model for presenting information to people? No. Okay. But here's the good news. Right here on the slide, it says negotiation is a skill that can be learned and perfected with experience. So it is a skill. It is something that you can learn. And as long as you apply over and over and over again, then you will learn the skill and then you'll be able to, utilize. And by the way, one of my mentors and I would always say that knowledge isn't power, as we have learned. Applied knowledge is power, right? Learning something and using the skill is where your power comes from. So when we look at these slides and all these, skills and models and tools, we can't just, learn for the sake of learning. That's the fool's mission. Learn for the sake of doing is what top producers are going to do. So, pay attention and really utilize these skills. So on page number 7, we have the overview of the 3 Ps that you can refer to. Basically, we have prepare, present, and position. So since we know negotiation is a skill and it's something that can be learned and perfected with experience, it's just a matter of following the model. So the model is using the 3P method. Preparing means preparation. It's key to not only getting a win-win and having a smooth negotiation, it's also crucial in building confidence, right? When I would think about when I was brand new, I would have to call another agent to ask about writing an offer. And for me, preparing was taking a piece of paper and I would write all the questions that I needed to ask, like a script, because I didn't have one that was like how to, talk to a listing agent about their listing. So I wrote down all the questions, one, because I didn't want to skip anything. And 2, it gave me confidence knowing that I knew what I wanted to achieve. I knew my outcome by asking the questions. Do you have any offers? How many do you have? Do you have overbids? Are they strong? Do you have what the seller's looking for? Where's the seller moving to? When do they need to be there by? Is there anything besides price that could affect this negotiation? Any questions for me? Awesome, right? So I have that little kind of dialogue built in, and that's that confidence that you'll have by utilizing the preparation process and not just immediately picking up the phone and winging it, right? So that was very important for me. Present means putting the negotiation process in play by presenting the offer. And when we say offer, it doesn't necessarily mean the purchase agreement, right? If a buyer asks for repairs and the seller responds with a different, doesn't just agree, but responds with a counter, that's an offer, right? So offers are always being made. It's not just a purchase agreement. So in the frame of negotiation, I want to make sure we understand that. And then position means moving both parties close until you have full agreement, right? It's slowly shifting the pieces of the puzzle around until they intersect and we have a deal, okay? So we're gonna start with the first, which is prepare. And I'm on the next page, on page 8 here. So these are the preparation pieces that we're gonna learn, okay? So the preparation steps agents can take to build confidence to help ensure a smooth negotiation process. Number 1 is to know your goal, right? I mean, that's probably the most important. It's number 1 for a reason. Have a clear goal of reaching a win-win agreement in which both the buyer and seller are satisfied with the outcome of the negotiation, right? When we think about price and value, and we think about it on the side of a listing, price is a negotiation strategy, right? It's how we put a product onto the marketplace to attract buyers. Value is what a buyer and a seller agree to conduct the transaction at, right? Both parties. So we have to have a win-win and everybody is completely satisfied with the outcome. And again, we're going to remind the client of motivation for moving or buying all along the process, and that when the contract closes, they'll be able to move on with their lives. Okay. So again, in the middle of a deal, when there's a lot of stress and tension and anxiety, we always just remind them in a couple of weeks, you will be in Texas and you will have completely forgotten. A year from now, you won't even remember, having to pay an extra $1,000 for the repairs for the termite, right? So again, bigger picture. Secondly, we have here, know your client. Who are you dealing with? Who are you working with? Okay. And it starts here by saying, make sure you fully understand your client's goals. So when we think about your client, what do they want? What are they looking to achieve? Learn the areas in which they're willing to negotiate and where they will stand firm. I'm going to add to know your client outside of my instructor manual, a little piece about personality, the DISC, right? If you haven't taken the DISC assessment, or you haven't done it in quite some time, just Google Tony Robbins DISC and learn yourself. I'm going to drop that in the chat real quick. Just Google Tony Robbins DISC and you will get a link to take the DISC personality profile assessment, because you want to know, is my client a D, an I, an S, or a C, a dominant, an interactive, a stable, or a conservative, or cautious? Because knowing The DISC profile of your client is going to help you when you're negotiating and presenting information. Okay. If your client is a high C, cautious and conservative, then they're not going to want to make a decision very quickly. And if they're a high D and you start talking and talking and talking and talking and not giving the bottom line, they're going to get frustrated and upset thinking that you are not doing the deal like they want to have the deal done. So know yourself first, and then know your clients and know what to look for. And by the way, the better you get at these skills, the more you'll be able to really lock in to your clients and see how they're responding to the way you're speaking to them and what information you're presenting to them. Okay. Number 3 here, it says think ahead. So anticipate what the other party wants out of the negotiation. Write down how you think they may counter the offer and how you plan to handle it. You know, if you're going to make a repair request and your buyer is asking for a million things, well, maybe you need to ask for even a little bit more, right? So, because you know the seller's going to come back with less in most cases, right? So what's the likely outcome? Are they going to accept everything, or are they going to respond with some sort of a counter or a negotiation? So think about that, and then think about how you can meet in the middle and make that win-win happen, right? Next, it says, set clear expectations. In your manuals, I highly recommend underline the word expectations or highlight that word. Expectations are how you create excellent customer service and an excellent customer experience. And we always say that we want to under-promise and over-deliver. Under-promise, over-deliver. What's the opposite of that? Over-promise and under-deliver. Okay, that does not sit well with your clients. When you promise the world and you are only able to get a small amount of whatever it is you're negotiating for, that sets you up as not very good at your job, right? If you can do the opposite, which is under promise and over deliver, well, then you're going to come out looking like a hero. Okay. Here's a simple example of that. When you make an offer for your buyer and the listing agent says, we got your offer, I'll have a counter offer for you tomorrow. Don't go back to your buyer and say, we're going to have a counter offer tomorrow. Right. And the reason why is because I've heard that coming out of listing agents' mouths for decades. And I've also seen numerous times where the next day they say, oh, we got a cash offer that we took it. Or, oh, we just got 10 more offers. We'll have multiple counters, but we're not going to have them until the end of the week. Right. So instead, I might say something like this. I talked to the listing agent. They did receive the offer. They confirmed receipt, and they're expecting to have a response to us soon. Okay, a response. A response isn't a counter offer. That could be a counter, a multiple counter, a rejection, an acceptance. So, temper the expectation. But when you go in and say, oh, I'm expecting we're going to have a counter offer tomorrow, and then it never comes, or even worse, the property gets sold. Well, guess what? Again, you overpromised and you can't keep your word, right? So think about how you set up expectations. And before you are meeting with other parties, you want to set clear and realistic expectations with your client, with the other parties, everybody, okay? Also with expectations, I would say, stress the importance of moving quickly to create a sense of urgency, right? We want to have a sense of urgency. So, part of that expectations with your client is being clear that win-lose agreements are going to be rejected, okay? So we want to make it a win-win. Next, we have be informed. Before making an offer or a counter offer, it's good practice to speak with a couple of other agents to see what their experiences are. Ask open-ended questions, use active listening to find out as much as you can about the other party and their agent if you can. This helps you know whom you're dealing with and what points you may be able to negotiate and where you and your clients have leverage. So if you can find out a little bit of info about the seller, about the other agent, and it all comes through asking questions. It's as simple as that. Okay. Let's see. This is a good one. Obey the law, right? That's a good one. Why? Well, you don't want to lose your license, right? So be aware. If you need help, that's where you can reach out to me as a resource. And then know your documents inside and out, right? Become familiar with our forms. We do contract classes every other week. They're all recorded. We have a YouTube channel where all of those are hosted. So you can always go back and review the most current, purchase agreement, listing agreement, disclosures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. So that is a little piece on preparing, right? So preparing. So let's keep moving on here, and we will talk a little bit about questions and answers and open-ended questions. So let's look at this. Asking questions is the key to gaining information to win a negotiation. One of my favorite things to say about selling is that great salespeople are great question askers. Great salespeople are great question askers. So what does that mean? Well, basically it's simple. It just means that the more you can ask questions, the better off you will be when it comes time to negotiate, right? So looking at our slide here, you can see that there's two types of questions. And I will say, understanding the right questions to ask is important to the negotiation process. Why? Well, asking questions allows you to establish and uncover objectives and goals of your client or your buyer listing agent, right? The other agent. So through asking questions, you gain more information. The more information you have at your disposal, the more leverage you will have in the negotiation, if that makes sense, okay? So as you gain more information, what you do is you strengthen your ability to negotiate. The more information you have, the stronger your ability to negotiate, and it also increases your chances of having a win-win. So let's look at a couple basic benefits of asking questions, okay? Number one is it's going to provide you with points that you're going to negotiate. Asking questions is going to help you understand what are the points of negotiation here. Is it price? Is it terms? X, Y, and Z, okay? Secondly, it provides insight, right? Asking questions provides insight on leverage. Where do you have leverage opportunities? Okay, very important. You want to know what is in your favor, right? Quick close. Is it shortened contingencies? Do you have an underwritten file, right? Or are you on the seller side? You have 20 offers and you can demand almost any term you want, okay? Asking questions also creates the expectations. It allows you to set and create expectations. And then asking questions helps you zero in more on what the goal is, right? Whether it's with your client or the other agent, it'll help you zero in on that. And then lastly, asking great questions will help make a win-win for both parties. It really creates a win-win opportunity for everybody, okay? All right. So as we see on the slide, at a basic level, there are two main types of questions used in negotiating: open-ended and closed questions. So if we look at the open-ended side, these are questions that have unlimited response options, okay? Mostly open-ended questions will start with who, what, when, why, and how, right? The basic, what do they call it? The 5 whys: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So you can see, what additional information should I know? What's important about closing in a short amount of time, and how do you feel about that? So these are our open-ended questions. And what I wrote in my notes is open-ended questions promote dialogue. Promote dialogue, meaning it encourages interaction, encourages a back and forth, and it creates a conversation, okay? On the other side, you have closed questions, and the closed-ended question is basically a question that's asking for a specific response. Usually it's going to be yes, no, or maybe a short one word or phrase. So do you need to sell by a specific date? What is the date you need to sell by? Do you have offers on the property? Yes or no? What's your bottom line price you would consider? What's the most you would offer? Or to the seller, what's the least you would accept? Okay. Closed questions. So if open-ended questions promote dialogue, well then closed questions, I say, would be used usually to close, right? To get an answer or an agreement or a piece of information that you must have. Okay, so important to understand the distinction and when to use them. You know, when you're first meeting a buyer or seller, you're really going to be open-ended because you want to be exploring. You want to ask some exploratory questions. When do you plan on moving? Where do you plan to move to? What's taking you there? What's important about that? Help me understand. Why is that important to you? How would not selling within 30 days affect you? What if we did sell your home in less than 30 days? What would that do for you? Right? So these are all those open-ended dialogue questions to get people to talk and interact with you, right? So, so it's important to understand the difference between the two and when to use them, right? Again, closing the closed questions, that's the end. That's when you're really looking to, right, finish off the transaction and close, okay? And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, don't be shy. Feel free to unmute yourself, type in the chat, whatever you desire. Let's keep going. So let's look at do, right? So ask questions to clarify and set expectations. So we're going to do a quick exercise here on page number 9. So I want you guys to get into your manuals briefly. And on page 9, there's a scenario, okay? And I want you to read the scenario, and then you're going to go through and circle or underline or highlight real simply the key areas in where you might need more information, okay, before you can confidently negotiate on your client's behalf. So these might be open-ended questions. And then you may want to write down a couple of closed questions as well to help you in the negotiation. So this is if you are representing a buyer. So go ahead and jump into this, guys and gals, read the scenario briefly, and then write down 3 or 4 different clarifying questions that you might ask to your client to help in a negotiation. Okay, go ahead and do that now. Let's take a couple minutes. Okay, folks, tell me what questions you are writing down to learn more about your client to help in this negotiation. What did you guys write?
Well, have you been pre-qualified?
That's a good one. Can you even afford to buy this place? All right. That's a good one. I like it. Good, good. And that's a closed question, right? That's a yes or no. What else?
What kind of lease do you currently have on your rentals?
Okay, so where are you at today? What's your status as of now, right? And that's digging for the ability to buy.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you guys ask?
Are you willing to make repairs if you get this home?
That's a good one, right? Are you willing to do the work yourself, right? Especially if we stay at that asking price of 20 grand below market, right? Did anyone write down where can you buy a house for $155,000?
Yeah.
Anybody else? What else do we got? What are some other questions you guys wrote down?
What is your budget?
Okay, what's your budget, right? Can you get up to that 175? Is that even possible, right?
Mhm.
That's a good one. I love it. I love it. You know, one of my favorite questions to ask in scenarios, like in all scenarios, what is it about this house that makes it your favorite? Why do you like this house so much, right? And what we're digging for is like, do you really, really, really love this home? And are you willing to get closer to that 175, right? Or what if they, and you can poke and prod a little bit. What if the seller says, we'll fix the roof, but we're not going to reduce the price, right? We'll do a couple of repairs, but we're going to stay at that price. What would happen? How would you respond to that? And again, this is all the preparing. This is like, let me ask my client a few questions to see how might they respond if certain things happen. So that way you can know what to expect. And really, you're also setting expectations up, right? By letting them know that, hey, we can make an offer. There's 3 outcomes, right? There's a accept, there's a reject, and there's a counter. So let's talk about that. What would happen in each of those scenarios, right? All right, let's move on. Let's move on. So we're going to look at page number 10 in your manual here. So now we're talking about present. We looked at prepare. Now we're talking present. So there's a couple points on the screen here. Pay attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. Okay. And what that means is like, are you listening for tonality? Are you monitoring body language? Now we're doing a lot of stuff virtually, but if you get the cameras on, right? If you dress up from the waist up, get people on their cameras, then you will be able to see what their nonverbal communication looks like. But if you can't see that, you can still listen for tonality. Number 2, keep quiet once you present an offer. This is like a basic sales 101 piece of information here. When you present an offer, you need to be quiet. There's an old saying in sales that the first person to speak loses. Okay. So when you are on a listing presentation and you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I recommend we list your price at 600,000. Are you ready to list with me tonight? You have to be quiet. They call it a pregnant pause. It means it's a little bit longer of a pause until they respond to you. It's important to get them to respond. And what happens in most cases that an unseasoned salesperson will be uncomfortable in that silence, right? And so for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, it'll seem like an eternity, and you'll then interject, you'll say something, and it'll kill the tension that you've built up to get them to make a decision, right? You're asking for a commitment. You're asking for a decision. So it's important to get them to respond. They'll say yes or no, and either way is fine. And a no doesn't mean no forever. It just means a no for right now. But you have to let them respond. So keep your mouth shut is what I actually write in my notes, okay? Third, when we're presenting, listen to what's important to the other party. So once you present an offer and they make a response, document, pay attention, listen to what they're saying to you. And of course, stay calm and relaxed. When you start showing signs of emotion or anxiousness or glee and joy or anger and stress, you're giving information that may not be beneficial to your client. So stay calm, take a breath, relax, listen, okay? And then focus on the customer's needs, right? Focus on the customer's needs, and then give your offer the best chance. And when we say give your offer the best chance, what that really means is explain the merits, right? Talk about why your offer is good, and then let them respond and listen, gather the information. You don't need to necessarily go back and forth and turn it into a bickering contest, right? You just listen and say, great, I'll be back with you. Let me talk to my client, right? So, pitch, deliver the information, listen, relax, take the information back and give it to your client. Okay. All right. Let's talk about what some of this actually looks like. So when we look at our slide here, positioning, learning, right? So there's a couple points here when we think about positioning. So we talk about what and how type of questions. So when we have our buyer and seller, one wants to close in 60 days, one wants to close in 30 days. Well, seller, you're requesting a 30-day closing. What's important to you about that 30 days? Okay. And they say, well, if they become defensive, it says here, you know, my goal is to let the buyer know why it's important to you. So we're asking these what and how, and I call the how type questions like possibility questions. The what questions, possibility questions. So like, I think how is more of a possibility question than what even is. So when we say things like, you know, how can we get closer to something that would be a win-win, right? We're creating possibilities here. So we're asking these types of questions to get other people to think about what a win-win strategy might actually look like, okay? How you position your negotiations and provide insight, you know, is basically all comes down to the way that you ask the questions and present it, okay? If that makes sense. So if you want to take a look at page 11 in your manual, so here's where you know, positioning starts to really take place here. If you think about what's written here, so number one, we have acknowledge and affirm the common ground, right? Acknowledge and affirm the common ground. And this is where everybody agrees. Sometimes you'll have agreement on every single term except for the price. And if you're not that far off on the price, man, you're really close. So you frame the negotiation by saying, gosh, looks like we have every single thing agreed upon here. There's just one little tiny thing we got to figure out. Of course, the price, right? So start with what you do agree on, not what you don't agree on, and frame it as a positive, right? And then next is ask what and how questions to better understand. So we just looked at that. So what would it look like if we met in the middle? How can we bring your seller and my buyer to come to an agreement where it's going to be a win-win? What would that look like for your client, right? These are those possibility questions. And then remember, positioning is a process. And as it says here, sometimes requires you to come back to the negotiating table more than once. Sometimes there might be several counteroffers needed to get an acceptance. I will say this about going back and forth on multiple counters back and forth. If you have more than one or two, there's a good chance that you're not communicating with the other party enough, right? I rarely have more than just one seller counter offer, or maybe a buyer counter to that seller counter. And the reason why is because I'm on the phone, right? I'm hammering these details out. Now, when we think about having several offers and counter offers, I guess as I think about it, when I'm on the phone, going back and forth with the other agent, those are offers and counter offers, right? That we're talking. And so I may have multiple, but it may be on the phone, but in writing, I'm generally going to only have one or two because I've, you know, negotiated and gotten back and forth with the other party until we pretty much have the framework of a deal. And now we're just putting it in writing and finalizing, right? So in the high tech consumer age, it's so common to rely on text messages and emails as opposed to picking up the phone and calling. Okay. Now I know when you have a listing agent that has 20 offers in a week and they're not calling you back, that can be difficult. But where there's a will, there's a way. You will find a way to get on the phone. Okay. So just keep calling, schedule appointments, do whatever you need to do to have that conversation, because, you know, it's a lost art. And I personally believe it's one of the bigger influencing factors in getting deals done in today's market for sure. Okay. And then lastly, here we have know when to walk away, right? Like old Kenny Rogers said, know when to fold them, right? So if it's not going to be a win-win, or there's just no way that a deal is going to get done in an equitable fashion, then you got to move on. You got to move on, and it is what it is. Okay. So be willing to walk away, and make sure your client is willing to walk away as well. There's a lot of power in that, by the way, when you have that kind of that takeaway close. You know, we're not going to take that deal, so I guess we just have a dead deal. Should we all move on? right? So be willing to ask those types of questions as well. Okay, let's look at some counter tactics. We're getting pretty close to wrapping up here, ladies and gentlemen. So we're looking at counter tactics, and I am on page number 13 in the manual. So there are multiple different counter tactics that you might get. And these are just real simple ways that people might negotiate with you, whether they know it or not. Whether they know it or not. And there's 3 of them on here, right? So we've got nibbling. Nibbling is where you give up a concession and then they think they have some sort of an advantage. So they keep pecking. They keep asking for more. They keep asking for more. They keep asking for more. Okay. And then we have what we call hot potato. This is where the other party tries to pass a problem back to you, right? So you make a request for repair. Seller says they can't afford it. So you got to take care of it. You got to fix it. That's hot potato. That's like giving it back. Okay. And then you have the good cop, bad cop, good guy, bad guy scenario. 2 people working together. One takes on opposing roles. One might be friendly. One might be a little more aggressive. And so you have that kind of behavior. And if we look on our slide here, we have counter tactics. So why don't you guys read through the slide real quick? They're not in order. I want you to match up which one you think is the most effective way. You can just draw a line on your slide or the page or whatever, or just, right, which hot potato does that apply to, A, B, or C, and then just go down the list. So take a quick moment and try to match those up, and then I will give you the answers. Okay, so if you want to comment, go ahead and comment. If you want to drop in the chat, go ahead and drop it in the chat. But for hot potato, which one did you pick? Which one do you guys pick? A, B, or C? Charlie's got B. Charlie's got B. I agree. B it is. B it is, right? So when we think about our hot potato, you want to, so when someone throws something back at you, test a little bit, poke at it a little bit. Is that valid? Is that true, right? Buyer makes a request, seller says they can't afford to do it. Can they really not afford to do it, or do they just not want to do it, right? Is this a real problem, or have we actually exhausted every possible solution? In that scenario, okay, maybe the seller doesn't have a lot of cash to do a repair. Well, maybe we can find somebody to do repairs and get billed through escrow, right? Second, we have good cop, bad cop, or good guy, bad guy. It should be pretty easy to figure that one out because it was actually referenced in the answer. That was C, right? Call them out on their game. If it continues, attribute what the bad guy says to the good guy. And basically, you're like throwing it into both parties and making them both the bad guys, and they'll start to realize that that's not effectively leading towards a negotiation. Okay. And then obviously that would leave nibbling to be A, ask for a concession in return before agreeing to anything else, right? So sometimes if you agree to a concession on your side, maybe you ask them for something as well. So both people are giving up a little bit, right? And that should put an end to, keeping the pecking going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay. Okay, folks, we talked about a lot today, and we're actually at the end of our presentation, which is good and bad, right? It's good because we're done. It's bad because this is my last Ignite. We have Susie tomorrow. We have Eddie on Friday. I should say Susie Thursday and Eddie on Friday. But I do want to recap real quickly. So just somewhere on your notes, I want you to write down what your aha for the day is, okay? And either write it into the chat or in a moment you can unmute yourself, but I want you to write one thing that you pulled from today's conversation about negotiating. So take a minute to write that down, and then if you would indulge me, write it into the chat, and then we will be done for the day. Thank you, Nicole. Ask good questions. That's a great one. One of my favorite ones as a coach, right? We have a class called Coaching Skills Camp, and they give us a big manual that's like 90 pages long. And a third of it is just lists of questions to ask. It's pretty crazy, pretty intense. Who else? Who else? Write it into the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. What did you learn today? One thing, just one thing. Let's get 3 more of these. Remember to be the active listener. Tawny, thank you for that. That's right. You know, interesting. I love how you phrased it. An active listener, right? Purposefully focusing and paying attention so that you can gather the appropriate information that you need. Mario got more info equals more leverage to negotiate. Exactly. You know, it's interesting too, huh? That's all tied together. We ask good questions, we listen to the answers, and when we get that information, we use it to create leverage, right? So it's all strung together there. I love that. Evelyn says, know your goal. What are you looking to achieve? What's the end result? Absolutely. You're spot on. Charlie, thank you. Under promise, overachieve, over deliver, right? We want to set up great customer experience. Ariana, ask your client to tell you versus telling them, right? I have a book somewhere around here that says it's called Stop Telling and Start Selling, right? Selling isn't just talking, it's asking questions and listening. And Jesse says, present and stay quiet. Keep your mouth shut, right? Don't be afraid of that awkward silence. You know, it's funny, even here on Zoom, I ask a question and, you know, you guys notice 30, 45 seconds go by before someone finally unmutes themselves. I've had to get really comfortable with these little silences that sometimes are presented on our classes. Anyways, hey, you guys are awesome. I appreciate all of you. Good job today. You got your manuals. Hope you took great notes. If you have questions, you need more help, feel free to reach out. I appreciate y'all. Hope you're safe and healthy. And we will resume on Thursday. We got 2 more to go, okay? We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Nick.
You got it. Have a good one, everybody.